The Water of Life, a Treatise on Urine Therapy by John W Armstrong. Foreword. By those many people who have derived and are still deriving benefit from urine therapy, I have repeatedly been asked to write a book, but hitherto I have demurred. First, because the necessary leisure has been lacking, and secondly, because I am averse to any form of self-advertisement. However, realizing that a thing which is put off too long may never be accomplished at all, I have finally decided to yield to persuasions, and this treatise is largely compiled from notes, case sheets, and letters. Other reasons for giving out my experiences to the world will become apparent to the reader in due course. I am fully aware that the publication of a book is attended with certain indirect drawbacks. One is that writer may be inundated with letters, and another is that if he is a practitioner, he may be inundated with patients who may apply to him care of his publishers. As I am not touting for patients, that was a further reason why I wished to delay writing the book. But now that it is going forth to the public, the following must be emphasized. 1. A law having been passed making it now illegal for any but a qualified medical practitioner to declare he can cure certain specific diseases, cancer being one, it should be noted that all case histories relative to such diseases mentioned in this book are those of patients treated prior to the passing of the law in question. I am not in a position to state whether the law can be stressed so far as to make it illegal for a layman even to say he has cured such disorders in the past, but if so, then in accordance with the medical dictum, one is forced to assume that where any such diseases have yielded to other than orthodox treatment, they have perforce been wrongly diagnosed. 2. As the therapy to be outlined in this book is an entirely drugless system of healing, and is a specific for health and not for any given disease, diagnosis plays no part in the treatment. Thus, although the chapters are headed with the names of various disorders, it is merely for the sake of the literary expedience and to show that they have proved amenable to the general treatment. John W Armstrong, 1944. Many people believe that 50,000 doctors, vast hospitals, armies of nurses, dentists, chemists, clinics, and about 300,000 mentally deranged are signs of progressive medicine and civilization. But actually they demonstrate complete failure of our medical system and wrong guidance of public in nutrition and other ways of living. Thousands of operations carried out weekly with brilliant technique give additional proof that the prior treatments had not achieved successful cure. Health and not disease is the true inheritance of life. Human creatures fail to realize facts which stare them in the face. We are made of what we eat, so if any organ becomes diseased, it generally means that the food was wrong. Quoted by Major C. Fraser Mackenzie. Quote, disease becomes a vested interest, and consciously or unconsciously, the doctors foster it as such. It is quite a common observation that doctors produce disease. Moreover, the whole system and philosophy of our dealing with disease is mistaken. Underquote, Dr. W. S. White. Hippocrates, the great priest of medicine, advised the physicians to accept the help of the laity in the treatment of disease, but his advice has seldom been followed. Like the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of health has to be taken by storm. John Armstrong. Chapter 1. Introduction. Owing to the increasing part played by vested interests in many branches of human endeavor, not least in the very lucrative providing of remedies for disease, intelligent members of the public are growing more and more distrustful of orthodox medical methods. Many people must have asked themselves for the following question: how comes it that for over 50 years the orthodox cancer researchers have been occupying themselves with the cause and cure of malignancy, yet still can suggest nothing better than the knife, radium, or X-rays. How comes it that, after letters from many doctors had appeared in the British Medical Journal testifying to the highly unsatisfactory results of radium treatment, it is nonetheless still boosted in this country and elsewhere? How comes it that when effective treatments for cancer have been discovered either by a qualified doctor or by practitioners of unorthodox schools, they have not been recognized by the Cancer Research Ring, which still asks the public to donate large sums of money towards the discovery of a cure? To these questions, with which I shall deal in my afterword, no satisfactory answers are forthcoming, and we are forced to the conclusion that although there are many selfless and noble-minded doctors to be found in most countries, in modern medicine itself, many things prevail which are much to be deplored. Number 1. The torture of animals for experimentation and for preparation of sera and vaccines. Number 2. The fostering of fear in the public mind by the means of advertising. Number 3. Commercialism and vested interests which ought to play no part in healing the sick. And number 4. A narrow-spirited element of trade unionism which suggests that the patients exist for the doctors instead of vice versa. All these things many doctors themselves have at one time or another commented upon and regretted in forcible terms. And yet, as after a war, nature or higher power seem to step in to adjust the balance of things by ensuring that a greater proportion of male children should be born, so when medicine becomes over-tinctured with material considerations, do they seem to inspire some method of healing as a corrective to these tendencies, and as a help to those who are large-minded enough to take advantage of it? Such a method may be precluded by other methods which prepare the way for its acceptance. For one must admit that naturopathy has been instrumental in curing many diseases where the orthodox system has signally failed. Nevertheless, as we shall see, naturopathy has, as it is usually practiced, does not go far enough, for although it can cleanse the body of its toxins, it cannot replace wasted tissues incidental to such grievous ills as consumption or other diseases of equal gravity. This can only be accomplished by an elaboration of an ancient therapy, the details of which I propose to put forward in this book, and which I have practiced on myself and some thousands of others with signal success, although many of them were said to be suffering from incurable diseases. It is true that at one point I had resolved not to write my book until I had the chance of curing even leprosy. But as I am unlikely to come across a case of this dread disease unless enabled to visit those countries where it is prevalent, I have decided to give the details of my experiences to the public without further delay. My contention is, and I do not stand alone in putting it forward, that within man himself is to be found the substance to cure his diseases, whether they be so-called wasting diseases or otherwise. And I propose to substantiate this contention by case sheets on the principle that 1 ounce of facts is worth many pounds of theories. If in the course of stating the facts, references to medical failures should be essential, this is unavoidable in the interests of the public and of truth itself, and such references are made in no spirit of hostility towards the doctors. As already implied, there are many unselfish and honest physicians to whom I wish to do no injustice. It is erroneous and harmful beliefs and practices which I am constrained to criticize, not personalities. The readers will see for themselves that such criticism cannot arise from any ulterior motives. I have no secret remedy or patent medicine to sell. Indeed, although a layman, I am only following the policy required from all reputable members of the medical profession themselves, viz. To make no secret of any discovery which may prove useful in curing mankind. The more so as in many cases the treatment can be carried out at home without any financial outlay whatever. Chapter 2: The Water of Life. Before relating my own experiences with urine therapy, it is advisable to quote some opinions derived from both ancient and modern sources as to the value of urine as a curative agent. Towards the beginning of last century, a book entitled 1000 Notable Things was published simultaneously in England, Scotland, and Ireland. In this book appeared the following quaint citation: "An universal and excellent remedy for all distempers inward and outward. Drink your own water in the morning 9 days together, and it cures the scurvy, makes the body lightsome and cheerful. It is good against dropsy and jaundice, drunk as before. Wash your ears with it warm, and it is good against deafness, noises, and most other ailments in the ears. Wash your eyes with your own water, and it cures sore eyes and clears and strengthens the sight. Wash and rub your hands with it, and it takes away numbness, chaps, sores, and makes the joints limber. Wash any green wound with it, and it is extraordinary good thing. Wash any part that itches, and it takes it away. Wash the fundament, and it is good against piles and other sores." Here is another quaintly expressed extract from an old book called Salmon's English Physician, published in 1695, which I will quote in part. "Urine is taken from humankind and most four-footed animals, but the former is that which is chiefly used in physic and chemistry. It is the serum or watery part of the blood, which being diverted by the emulgent arteries to the veins is there separated, and by the ferment of the parts converted into urine. Man's or woman's urine is hot, dry, dissolving, cleansing, disgusting, resists putrefaction. Used inwardly against obstructions of the liver, spleen, gall, as also against the dropsy, jaundice, stoppage of the terms in woman, the plague, and all manner of malign fevers. Outwardly applied, it cleanses the skin and softens it by washing it therewith, especially being warm or new made. Cleanses, heals, and dries up wounds, though made with poisoned weapons. Cures dandruff, scurf, and bathed upon the pulses, cools the heat of fevers. Is excellent against trembling, numbness, and the palsy, and bathed upon the region of the spleen, urine eases the pains thereof. The virtues of the volatile salts of urine: it powerfully absorbs acids, destroys the very root of most diseases in human bodies. It opens all obstructions of veins, mesentery, and womb, purifies the whole mass of blood and humors, cures cachexia, rheumatism, and hypochondriac diseases, and is given with admirable success in epilepsies, vertigos, apoplexies, convulsions, lethargies, migraine, palsies, lameness, numbness, loss of use of limbs, atrophies, vapors, fits of the mother, most cold and moist diseases of the head, brain, nerves, joints, and womb. Leucorrhea should be added to this list. It opens obstructions on the veins and urinary passages, dissolves tartarous coagulations in those parts, breaks and expels stone and gravel. It is a specific remedy against dysuria, ischorrhea, and all obstructions of urine whatsoever. So much for this panegyric on what some of us have come to term the eau de vie. But one also reads that in 18th century it was much extolled as a valuable mouthwash by Parisian dentists. I will now quote some modern opinions as to the value of urine. Writing in Candide, Professor John Ronstadt repeatedly stresses the biological significance of those substances known as hormones. The gist of his article, of some 1250 words, may be condensed as follows. A recent discovery regarding the activity of hormones has completely revolutionized their study, viz. that certain of them filter through the kidney to pass out in the urine. Multiple hypophysical hormones, the hormones of the adrenal and hormones of the sexual glands, have been found in the normal urine. The discovery of hormone urinotopy has had far-reaching consequences. Urine provides a practically unlimited quantity of basic matter. From the therapeutic point of view, it is possible to envisage the use of these human hormones as apparently capable of exercising great power over the human organism. Thus, urine, extolled by many of the ancients but misunderstood by the semi-moderns, now appears in the light of the wonderful reservoir of filter of preeminent value. It contains in a pure and often undreamt of quantity products of the most vital nature, bearing out what Mr. Ellis Barker maintained when he wrote that our body distills the most wonderful medicines and provides the most perfect serums and antibodies. I will now quote some remarks taken from a pamphlet by Dr. T. Wilson Ditchman, Ph.C., M.D., who writes, "As the urine content varies according to the pathological state of the patient, it is indicated in all forms of disease except those caused by traumatism, broken limbs, or those that are of a mechanical nature. It saves the physician from the mistake that is made in selecting the indicated remedy from 3,000 drugs or more. What cannot be cured by the forces of the body cannot be cured by the forces outside the body." It is not irrelevant here to mention that late Maurice Wilson, who made a magnificent, if abortive, attempt to climb Mount Everest, ascribed his immunity from ordinary ills and his astonishing stamina to his many fasts on urine only, plus external friction with urine. The lamas of Tibet and the yogis with whom he associated prior to his attempt claim to live to a great age by means of the use of urine. By the same means they can also traverse deserts inaccessible to ordinary mortals. Last century, between the 1860s to 70s, the drinking of one's own urine was a well-known cure for jaundice, and some doctors had the courage to prescribe it. I learned from one of my patients that when he was a boy, his grandfather had cured him of an attack of jaundice by urging him, on the advice of a doctor, to drink all of the urine he passed during the 4 days of his illness. Among gypsies, the health-giving properties of urine have been known for centuries. Cow's urine has been taken in large quantities for the cure of Bright's disease, dropsy, and other afflictions. I once met a Dorset farmer who had, over a period of 60 years, drunk 4 pints of cow's urine on a day. He was 80 at that time, straight as a yardstick, and he told me that he was never ill. He had, on the advice of a gypsy, begun treatment at the age of 20 for throat and chest trouble. Nevertheless, cow's urine as a curative agent is inferior to the patient's own urine, and I have known it to fail in a case of Bright's disease brought on by alcoholism. The wiser of the ancient Greeks used nothing but urine for treatment of wounds. The Eskimos, even to this day, adopt the same measures. The question may be asked if urine therapy has been used by anyone in comparatively recent times, and the answer is in the affirmative. Apart from the others, the late W. H. Baxter, J.P. of Leeds and Harrogate, not only took his own urine but wrote numerous pamphlets on the subject, which might have been regarded more seriously had they not been interladed with somewhat irrelevant moralizings. Mr. Baxter, who lived to a ripe old age, declaring that he had cured himself of a cancerous growth by applying his own urine in the form of compresses and by drinking his own urine neat. He further declared that he had cured himself of other complaints by these simple means. Mr. Baxter contended that urine is the finest antiseptic that exists, and having made this discovery, he formed the daily habit of drinking 3 tumblers full of this urine as a prophylactic against disease. He maintained that if autogenous urine is taken in this way, the more innocuous it becomes. He applied it to his eyes as a strengthening lotion and used it after shaving for his complexion. He also advocated its external use for wounds, swellings, boils, etc. As an apparent, he declared it to be unsurpassed. See Doctors, Disease and Health by Cyril Scott. I can vouch for the truth of his statement, as Mr. Baxter was for a short time one of my patients. But what is not mentioned in the above is that during the treatment he fasted on urine and water only. This fasting, as the reader will see later, is an essential part of the treatment, at any rate in serious disease conditions. In some rural districts, the use of cow's urine has been advocated by doctors for boils. A case may be quoted of a man who had a number of painful boils under his arm. They were quickly cured by compresses of cow's urine. En passant, I may mention that not so long ago, one of the most exclusive and expensive toilet soaps was made from the dehydrated salts and fats of the urine of grass-fed cows, and another from the urine of Russian peasants. My informant was a chemist who knew what he was talking about. Furthermore, some expensive face creams contain hormones derived from human urine. What the eye seeth not. Chapter 3. Some objections answered. Before proceeding, it is advisable to deal with some objections which have been and may still be raised. It has been argued that if man were intended to drink his own urine, he would have been born with the instinct to do so. But one may as well argue that because man has not been born with the instinct to do deep breathing exercises or adopt other measures which have been proved conducive to health, they are therefore invalid or reprehensible. Take, for instance, the yogis of India. By dint of practicing breathing exercises, strains, postures, etc., they not only arrive at a perfect state of health, but contrive to extend life far beyond the usual 80 years and 10. At 150 years of age, a proficient Hatha yogi has not even a grey hair. See Raja Yoga by Swami Vivekananda. It is true that the science of yoga can only be safely learned at the hands of a competent teacher, but that is another argument against the instinct theory. See Heaven Lies Within Us by Theos Bernard. One notices, by the way, that man does not trouble about his instincts when it is a question of imbibing strong liquors or smoking hundreds of cigarettes. In short, when it is a matter of doing things which are bad for him, even though the first time he experienced their delights, his instinct rebelled. And now to answer another objection. How can it be right to take back into the body something which the body is apparently discarding? And yet, if we turn to nature, what do we find? We find that where instead of scientific manures, the dead leaves are put back into the soil, the resultant flowers are the most fragrant, the fruits the sweeter, and the trees the healthier. On the other hand, where the soil is for some reason deprived of those chemical substances produced by the dead leaves, etc., then the trees which grow in that soil are disfigured by excrescences, which I think quite aptly have been called tree cancers. What we are accustomed to regard as useless dead leaves are the very opposite of useless, and should be dug back into the soil instead of being swept away by the gardener. Let those who challenge the statement taste the aisni produced, grown from soil, treated on the principle that all that comes from the soil should be put back into the soil. And they will soon be convinced that the principle is a correct one. The idea that nature is wasteful is erroneous. She only appears wasteful to us because we do not understand her. The rotting dead leaves provide the most valuable mineral salts for the soil, one of the most essential being potash. Even the ashes of burnt dead leaves and burnt wood, charcoal, are of great value. Therefore, why should a principle which applies throughout nature not apply, with certain reservations, to the human body? This question is the more readily answered if we consider the constituents of urine. Yet, before doing so, something should be said about the unreliability of urine analysis as a means of diagnosis. Though urine analysis is still a practice among orthodox doctors, it has been found that the elements in and general condition of urine depend far more on the character of the food and drink taken by the patient than on any fancied or real disease condition. Even the presence of sugar can no longer be regarded as any infallible sign of diabetes. This I have proven to my own satisfaction by taking for a day nothing but drinks made of chemical sweet powders and nothing in the way of food except a quantity of heavily sweetened ices. On such a diet, after 12 to 14 hours, the urine of an otherwise healthy person became charged with sugar and suggested to the doctor that he had diabetes. Similar mistakes have been made with regard to albumin found in the urine as the result of an ill-balanced diet. Some years ago, a friend of the writers connected with the life insurance company had a number of prospects turned down owing to heavy deposits of albumin in their urine. Finally, he brought 3 of these men along for investigation. By dint of altering their diet, all these supposed to be indications of Bright's disease, nephritis, or albuminuria, from which they were alleged to be suffering, very soon vanished. And at a subsequent examination by the insurance doctor, they were told they must have had local inflammations when previously examined. Further comment seems superfluous. If the elements which urine reveals are not required by the body, then why do our food chemists and biochemists emphasize their value and declare them to be essential to the body upkeep? The idea that urine contains poisonous elements which the body is endeavoring to eliminate is based upon theory only and is not demonstrated by the facts, as survivors in open boats and rafts often drink their own urine when their water supply becomes deficient. Surely, if they were drinking a poisonous fluid, they would die or become very ill. Far from this being the case, the practice of drinking urine is pronounced to be harmless. But, as the medical department of the Navy pointed out in a letter to an inquirer, the benefit obtained is not as great as would appear at first sight, because in dehydration the output of urine falls to a very low level. I shall comment on this later. Meanwhile, I may remark that what may be a poison when separated from its natural environment may not act as a poison when remaining in its natural environment. The medical profession may have been impressed when, at the beginning of the century, Sharin wrote a whole book on the poisons of urine, but as Professor John Ronstadt, already quoted, has since written, the time is not far off when it will be imperative to write of the blessings of urine. Indeed, as we shall see in the course of these pages, the most pregnant of all facts is the outstanding fact that urine, however thick, concentrated, scanty, or seemingly poisonous it may appear at the onset of such diseases as genuine Bright's disease, influenza, and others, very soon becomes filtered and greatly increased in volume when freely imbibed. This is a fact I have witnessed, together with other practitioners of urine therapy, in hundreds of so-termed hopeless cases, and is the best and most definite answer to the objection with which I am dealing. One other objection which has been mooted, namely by those who are wont to put their trust in the princess of medicine, is as follows. If urine was at one time known to be such a valuable remedy, why has it fallen into disrepute? And yet, those who put this question must be unacquainted with the most elementary facts of orthodox medical history, which related of one long series of changes of policy, changes of drugs, of treatments, of fads and fashions, and exploded superstitions in courts, of altercations, of envies, and even of persecutions. Some of the strangest remedies have had a vogue for a few years, only to be regarded a few years later as the most disgusting and barbarous superstitions. For instance, the notorious Cardinal Richelieu was given horse dung in wine to drink on his deathbed, and not by quacks but by men we should nowadays call qualified doctors. See Devils, Drugs and Doctors by H. W. Haggard, M.H.D. Nor am I here giving away state secrets in alluding to the instability which characterizes the orthodox medical profession. Speaking at the King's College, H.M. School on October 1st, 1918, Surgeon General Sir Watson Chen, MP, urged the students to remember, medicine is not an exact science. A good deal of what they were being taught was not true. When they came to deal with life, they knew so little about the living body that they could not be dogmatic. They could only lay down hypotheses which would hold for a day and then pass away. And just as the teachings of 70 years ago seemed to them very curious and not very sound, it would be exactly the same 40 years hence. The Times, October 2nd, 1918. The truth of this utterance applies every bit as much today as it did in 1918, perhaps even more so. It is no exaggeration to say that, far from being an exact science, in spite of all scientific tests that patients are subjected to in these days, it still remains such an inexact science that 10 different doctors have been known to give 10 different diagnoses relative to so apparently simple an ailment as persistent headaches. In the American journal Liberty, there appeared a significant article by a man in late 20s who relates his attempts to get rid of his annoying trouble by consulting no less than 10 doctors in succession, and at the end of his adventures he still retained his headaches. As the story is so significant and not unfraught with its ironic and humorous side, it may be condensed here. The first doctor told him he had an obstruction in his nose, and must see a nose specialist. The second told him there was nothing the matter with his nose, but he must see an oculist. The third told him he had a low blood pressure and must have injections. The fourth told him he had the high blood pressure and must diet himself to lower it. The fifth told him liver was enlarged and he must have electrical treatment. The sixth told him his liver was not enlarged, but it secreted insufficient bile. The seventh told him that his pituitary gland was not functioning properly and he must have glandular injections. The eighth told him he was suffering from intestinal poisoning and must cut down his eating and his smoking. The ninth told him that he was a case of nervous debility and he must take some pills for the trouble. The 10th told him there was nothing really the matter with him and that his headaches were just headaches. In citing this article, I am not implying that doctors are ignoramuses. On the contrary, they are so full of erudition that they cannot see the wood of truth for the trees of learning. That is one very cogent reason why sooner or later they reject the simple remedy or treatment for the complex, no matter how efficacious that simple remedy has proved to be. A final objection which may be raised against urine intake by fastidious, although it constitutes no argument against its therapeutical value, is that the taste must be so revolting that only heroes could bring themselves to drink it. This assumption, however, is incorrect. The taste of healthy urine is not nearly as objectionable as, say, Epsom salts. Fresh morning urine is merely somewhat bitter and salty, but as already mentioned, the more frequently it is taken, the more innocuous does it become. And as might be expected, its taste varies from day to day, and even from hour to hour, according to the foods which have been eaten. Even the urine which is passed in some serious diseases is not as obnoxious to taste as its appearance may often suggest. And now, having cited testimonials about ancients and moderns as to the therapeutical value of urine, and having also dealt with the aforementioned objections, I will sum up the evidence contained through many years of practice and personal experience on the part of those who are in a position to know the real facts. Urine, on being taken into the body, is filtered. It becomes purer and purer even in the course of one day's living upon it, plus tap water if required. First, it cleanses, then frees from obstruction, and finally rebuilds the vital organs and passages after they have been wasted by the ravages of disease. In fact, it reveals not only the lungs, pancreas, liver, brain, heart, etc., but also repairs the linings of brain and bowel and other linings, as has been demonstrated in the case of many killing diseases, such as consumption of intestines and the worst form of colitis. In fine, it accomplishes what fasting merely on water or fruit juices, as some naturopaths advocate, can never achieve. The proof of this statement will be found in the case histories adduced in the following pages.